that you see here, absolutely every piece that I make is designed to be hung in any direction. So every single piece will take on a different life, hung in a different direction. So for example, I'll set this one off the wall. Take this little guy off here. So on the backs of my pieces, I have multiple hanging points, and then it allows you to change the piece of artwork. And so over the course of its life, you get tired and you can just turn it a different direction. And then you have a whole different experience. So the sculptures, the table sculptures that are over this way, I'm just gonna let this sit here for now, are also done in that manner. And so people were, my daughter's friends were asking, oh, these are attached, but they're not. They're all just balanced. So again, they're made to be moved, rearranged, and played with. Every time that I attempt to put something in a fixed position, I have some kind of anxious reaction where I'm like, but it could be this way, or it could be that way, or I could turn it upside down, or so I think the endless possibilities of pieces is part of what inspires me with my work. And get this right in here, maybe. Yeah, that one might not be as friendly this way. So the ever so careful balancing. So you know, a lot of these pieces, even though they're all handmade, so there's no like firm right angles and straight corners. So that's why, for example, this one took a little bit of finagling to rearrange. Life is imperfect. You know, you're always given different things that are thrown at you from different angles, and it's just, to me, very important to be able to see things from different perspectives and retool your mind to say, hey, this could be any number of things in any number of ways, and any fascination that you might have with something in particular can completely change in an instant.
Please silence your phones.
That's my phone. That's my phone. You know, so just like that, you can, and it takes very steady, particular concentration. So yeah, at my studio, oh, that one's not going to be happy that way. In my studio, I'll play with these pieces in creation of actually just making their colors and stuff. But the actual organization of the pieces on site, like I made all these while I was here. There was no pre-planning. And
I was shocked the first time I saw the little kids playing with the art. I'm like, they're not supposed to touch that.
yeah.
But
So,
it's like,
it's hands-on though, huh?
Yeah.
Whose
Oh, yeah.
husband was in here? Your
Mine.
husband
He
knocked this
knocked this
over,
one down. It's
and he
true.
was like, and honestly, that's kind of part of the, I don't know, I guess that's the uniqueness of what I do. I want people to touch it. I want them to interact with it. When you go to a museum, you're not allowed to touch anything. And so, well, ironically, Jeff Koons' piece was just knocked over, right? And it broke. Well, you knock something like this over, it's just gonna give it more character, you know, and that's also par for life. Like, you get knocked over, you get your bumps and bruises, and then you gotta pick yourself back up, and you got more character for it. So I don't know how long that one will stay standing.
Love it.
But you know, it's an example of you just continually rearranging and re-engaging with the work. So it's not just a stasis piece. So then when it comes to, you know, like this one had a lot of different arrangements. So one of the hardest things that I have doing is titling work. So when it comes time to title my pieces, I'll put them out on the internet, on Instagram, Facebook, and say, hey, you know, come help me title this. And so this piece and this piece, and there's another one down here, and then the three in the front window don't have titles yet. So if anybody has any titling ideas, and they're laughing at me, I should probably silence my phone.
We're not laughing at you, we're laughing at Ben.
At Ben? Okay, quit laughing at Ben, it's making me nervous.
No, you're fine.
So the titling process is also part of the engagement with the work, because in a different position, the piece will have a different meaning. So this can be hung this direction, it's set up to be hung horizontally. You could take and put this piece one way and, you know, feather these stair step pieces out in completely different directions, flipping things around. Even the pieces that are just square and rectangular are also designed to be hung horizontally, vertically, in groups, as singles. And it just makes for, I don't know, more fun, more interest, more engagement. These panels are from our job sites. They are just a basic MDF board. We put them on the floors of the construction sites to protect the good floors while we're doing construction. And we used to just, after they had their lifespan and were damaged enough, they would just go to the dump. And after a while, I was like, hey, I wonder if I could use those in some way. And so I started just having them on my art table. So they just be the surface of my table instead of having paper. And then after a certain point of doing projects on them, they'd be kind of interesting. And so I would finish them off as paintings. And after they have their life as a painting, and maybe I haven't sold them, or maybe I wasn't super successful, I will take them and deconstruct them and turn them into wall sculptures. So they have a veritable life. And then of course the wall sculptures can then be rearranged to ad nauseum. And so it can continue to have an extended life. At some point, I started to get bored with just rearranging the shapes.
Yeah,
And I started doing these pieces that they shift. So you don't necessarily have to turn this upside down, but you could. But then you could have some fun just putting the piece in a different position. And this is my peekaboo collection. So I've got a couple pieces like that. And this guy, he's come more like a clock. So he can be rearranged in a lot of different ways. And so you just can continue to interact with the pieces. So a lot of this, almost everything here is done from salvaged or scrapped material from our construction sites. I have a printing house that is right by me. These were the coaster cutout. So this comes in a big sheet. And I was in there one day and he had them in the back and I was like, hey, what do you do with those? He's like, oh, they just go to the recyclers. I'm like, oh, can they go in my car? So off they went into my car. And then I work I'm a mixed media artist, but one of the unique parts of my artistry is this holographic and reflective material. It's called roly foil, and it's a heat and pressure process. So the pigments come in rolls like aluminum foil, but it's a different product. And then it's heat and pressure transferred onto whatever substrate I use. So the easiest thing to transfer to is the metal, which is what some of those long skinny pieces are over there, and on paper, because paper's thin, and metal's a natural heat conductor. When I start working on these thicker wood products, it's a much more difficult process because the wood's a natural insulator, and so I have to work at a higher temperature, or I have to spend a lot more time making the pressure application. So I'm still working out better ways to get the foil onto the wood panels, because it's a very trying process. It's not like just painting something on. So now I used to be only foil, and now I incorporate spray paints and house paints and acrylic paints, inks, pastels, oil crayons, paint sticks, and scratches, and foils. And that's kind of what I do. So there's kind of a life history in all of these pieces. They come from, I just scrap them out of our job sites and I take them back to my studio and they sit in piles and bunches, and then starting to expand out past just the wood products, and I'm starting to experiment with some of the metal strappings and plastic strappings and miscellaneous cuts from electricians and plumbers and things like that. So it's hard to make it so it's pushed past its regular interpretation I'm like, oh, well, that's clearly, you know, a piece of, oh yeah, I have one piece down there that has, it has, actually those three pieces, those three peekaboo pieces, one has a Schluter system, floor system that we use for running electrical wires in the floor, and it's put under the tile, and I changed it from its standard orange color into hot pink, and then there's also some screen that we used from screening the porches. But it was funny, I was at a show in Chicago, and one guy walked up and he's like, "Is that the Schluter floor system?" Yes, it is. So he recognized it, but it took him a minute, and I think that's the idea of pushing it past just reclaimed into an actual recreation, and that's part of what I do. So yeah, some of these have drawer pulls that were left over, and these are just screws that I found on the job site. So I have a collection of a lot of little random things, but it's hard not to keep collecting, and it's hard. So I'm trying to say, okay, I'm going to collect up a bunch of things, and then I'm going to work from that group and create a small collection of artistry pieces from what I've already scrapped, and then I'll move on to the next collection based on the next group of stuff that I get, instead of just stockpiling, because you can get too much stuff, and I have a lot of stuff, but not too much. So this year, I knew I had these great windows to work with, and so I decided to do some more three-dimensional, well, it's sort of three-dimensional, it's still flat, so it's still reminiscent of the other works, but it can be turned, and when it's hanging freely, then it'll take on different lives and personalities all on its own for the mobiles. And those are also untitled, so I'm looking for titles for those too.
When you're working, like, say, on this piece,
Mhm.
do you have a vision, or do you take, like, the triangular piece and go, oh, what can I do with this? And that's how you do it.
I have no vision.
Okay.
I have hands-on. I just want to move, collect, cut, shape, form, pull things that are in existence and kind of retool them. But I worked with Chung-Yi Chu. I don't know if any of you guys know who Chung-Yi Chu is. She was my metalsmithing professor at the University of Iowa, and she actually has a show at the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art right now that's a retrospective of her history, and she made us work out of the scrap bin for our first semester. So everything that we used was somebody else's discarded cut pieces or projects they didn't like, and it just gave me a love of, I already kind of liked mosaic work and puzzles and things, and so it gave me a love of finding, like, oh, this is really unusual. What could I do with this? How could I make this my own? So rarely, oh, I should have brought my notebooks. I call them sketchbooks, but they're really miniature collages that are things like this. And I don't know this one. So this one I did as a small sketch that I had cut out pieces and a collage. So I did paintings and watercolors and things, and then I cut them up into random shapes and pieces, and I'll sit at home and I'll make individual collage pieces on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. And some of those pieces then I can translate into larger pieces. This is an example of that. So this was first a sketch, and then I actually recreated it this size. So it started out this small. Whenever I do that though, I feel like I'm copying somebody. Like, it's a weird sensation. Like, once I've done something one time, it feels like I've completed it. But that translation of sketch to piece allows people to peruse a large amount of expression and inventory that I can make. So it's very interesting to see or to think about the different ways that I come at the process. So sometimes I do little sketches, so I'm making all the two-dimensional work, I cut it in pieces, I do the sketches, and then I make the piece. Sometimes I find scraps that are really interesting, and then the piece is born out of that and colored. Sometimes the piece is a full sheet that's colored and then cut into a composition, and other times it's just a bunch of random pieces I have at the studio like this that just become a whole new piece of art. But it's very hard for me to commit.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, but this would look good with this, and this would look good with that. So while these are, I like these a lot, like they're very cohesive pieces, I tend to like things like this where there's a lot of random pieces, because then I could use them with another piece, or you could take the piece that's behind Leona here and combine it with, you know, a few other random pieces, and now you have a bigger scale project or scale piece of art. So I'm working on a commission right now for somebody's staircase, and they liked a three-piece like this, but it wasn't big enough, and so we were gonna add some additional pieces to it, and yeah, it's very, very different. So that's
Thank you.
fun.
Any questions?
Yes, did you do your necklace?
I did. I do jewelry. So I have in this gift shop, there's some earrings and necklaces, and yeah, so it's very easy to work very small, like this in comparison to the big scale, and all of the jewelry is foil, so it's a unique process for that.
The works on paper are the only ones you have. Are those over there that are
Yep.
framed? That's
The framed ones are the works on paper. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And don't forget to play and make sculptures, 'cause that's what this is for.
So this is a very artistic family, and as I learned, Leona is not only an artist, but a writer and a musician and a vocalist. And so we'll go over to the South Gallery, and you can tell us a little bit about your style of work. So we'll head over there. Thank you.
This way.
Make sure you
Yes.
This is our daughter, and she spent a lot of time here when this was a pharmacy.
Oh, okay. Really?
Doesn't it seem funny walking in here? Amy?
Yeah. Probably is weird
How many
to
years,
walk in
how many
here
years
like
ago
this.
was that? A couple years back?
Oh, quite a few years
Oh, was
back.
it? Okay.
Okay, well, my name is Leona Rocca. I'm Kimberlee Rocca's daughter. And I've been doing art since I started with My Little Ponies. So this is one of my sketchbooks here. You can feel free to look through any of these sketchbooks, but like this is like some of my first pieces here. Of course, I had to do My Little Ponies.
Were you like were you 2 years old?
I was like, no, 4. But so I started there, and I remember watching my older sister Sophia. She drew people. She was in 6th grade. I was probably in 4th grade at the time, so that's why I started doing My Little Ponies and drawing all the time. And then I remember in 6th grade, I started drawing people, and she's like, "You're copying me. You can't do that. You're copying me. You can't draw people." So it was like kind of okay, I'll still draw some My Little Ponies, but I started drawing people a lot, and that is when I really found a love for superheroes. Was in 6th grade, and so I'm a big comic book reader, and I really love storytelling and the aspects that you can communicate storytelling through art pieces. So almost every piece I have a story for, or I try to come up with background. So I'm trying to think here, so a lot of my work for a long time was just sketchbooks. So I'd always just sketch, and I did that like every day, and I never really brought anything to finished pieces. And I remember I started an Instagram account when I was in 7th grade, and I'd start posting my sketches all the time, and I remember seeing all these other artists, and I loved their work, and they were all digital artists. And when I was that age, there was that whole disagreement of, is digital art real art, or is it fake art, and are these people just copying other people, and it's not real art? So I'm like, well, I want to do that. I want to do digital art. So I began saving for an iPad, and that's what most artists that I followed on Instagram did as well. So I started saving for that iPad, and my parents helped me pay for it. So in 8th grade I got that, and I began doing digital pieces. So these are some of my digital pieces. And most of the pieces in this gallery are digital, and we were able to blow them up in size. So a lot of these, I'd sketch something in my sketchbook, and I'd go, hey, I like that. I take a picture of it, or I'll use it as a reference, or I'll even just use the inspiration of it, and I just draw it on my iPad. And the program works exactly like sketching. I have an Apple Pencil, and it's pressure sensitivity, and you draw it out, and it's exactly like doing it traditionally, so there's no cheating. It's just like any other art style. And so I began doing that all the time. I was in my room constantly, just on my iPad, drawing, and it takes it's a learning curve to know how to do it digitally, because you don't know how the program's gonna react to certain things. So that's been a process of since 8th grade, and so that's one of my most recent pieces there on that blanket, and that's really, I think I'm really starting to find my style in my work, and that's something that I've been discovering over the past year and a half, where I'm not so much working on like how do I draw a hand, but how do I want to draw a hand, and how do I make the hand look how it's kind of fun to make it look. So let's see here. Oh, so this is a really good example. One of the things, actually, I take inspiration from my mom, is I do a lot of like triangle stuff in my work, and like I'll sometimes put like triangles on people's faces. I don't think I do that as much anymore, but like these guys, that was something I did in a style for a while, and a lot of my pieces are inspired by comic book art, and I really like very specific lines and like having it all figured out in the line work, and then the colors just kind of lay behind it. But as I've been getting older and more mature with my art, you guys can come in. This is an example of a piece I've been experimenting with, a style where I do the line work, but then I color over top of it and do more of a painterly style. So it's not so much of just here's the line work and then I'll just throw some colors on underneath it, but instead letting like the shape I've created from the lines be covered by color and then like elevated in that kind of way. But mainly when I do pieces digitally, a lot of these are commissions, but even if they're commissions, I still try to make them very personal to my client. So for example, this is my cousin here. This is an example of a piece. I do commissions of people as superheroes. So they tell me their favorite color, their hobbies, something about themselves. So this is my cousin, so I know her pretty well. She plays basketball for North Carolina. So she wanted a superhero based on that. And so I asked her like, okay, who's your favorite superhero? She said Wonder Woman. So I was like, okay, I'll try to incorporate that. So like the helmet is kind of like Wonder Woman, like inspired. She has her like headband thing there. And then she has like the gauntlets that Wonder Woman has. So we just take little elements from their favorite superhero, but I try to make it their own and make it their own superhero. And I also really like, I pray on the pieces I do, and I try to like see what God wants me to put for those people, and like what are their gifts that he's trying to have me bring out in each piece I do. So like my brother, here's my brother, he commissioned me to do this. He loves America, so he didn't ask me to do like an American tie or anything like that, but I really try to tell a story through each one of my pieces. So like you look at him and you see like, okay, he has a nice watch. Do you think he likes nice watches and Rolexes? Did he buy a Rolex maybe? So I just try to make each one of my pieces really fun and bring a lot of life and energy into the characters, no matter who they are. And I want to tell a story through each piece I do. So yeah, these are mostly digital, and then I have some watercolor and ink. This is one of the first pieces I ever did that was a very long process. It was about an 8-month process to make this. I started with just like sketches. You can see them in my sketchbook over there. It's somewhere in there. And my art teacher really challenged me to make it a very like big piece. Like I'd never done something to this level where I had to think about the composition so much. But after I did this, I began to think about composition in every single piece I've made since then. So it's not just like page, boom, character, nothing behind it, and then just blank color. I try to like make it an all-encompassing piece, so like your eye goes here, but then it also goes here, and then all around here. So I'm still learning, and I think I'll be learning my whole life, and it's just a joy of the process. I just love creating. So a lot of experimenting even in the last few months. These are pieces I'd never done something like this before, but just like I know how to draw a face, but how much can I stretch a face to make it still look recognizable, but still bring out a lot of expression. But not much else. A lot of the pieces I do, I do it for the joy of it, and I didn't think I'd be able to make such a like career out of it type thing. I've gotten so many commissions. I don't even have to have a job in high school right now, And I never dreamed that I'd be able to get this far. I remember seeing artists on Instagram and I'm like, wow, I wish I could do that. I wish I could make charms and stuff like that. I have keychains too. So I feel like my art's very marketable, but I still have to keep reminding myself I do it because I love it. So whenever I start to feel like I'm like not loving my art, I have to take a step back from commissions and then I just go and create what I'd like to. But do you guys have any questions?
Do you have any plans after you're finished with high school, like maybe art school, for example?
So I'm going to the University of Iowa, but I actually don't know if I'm going to go into art. I do musical theater and acting. I write. I do like tons of different things. So I might go down a teaching field, or I might. I think I'm going for screenwriting. I have so many gifts in so many areas that I'm not sure where it's going to take me yet. So I'm definitely keeping art as an option, and I think I'll probably take some classes at Iowa because they have really good classes, but not 100% sure. God will kind of take me where.
So it's engineering for sure. Engineering.
There you go.
No, hey.
Be a lawyer.
Are any of these self-portraits?
Let me think. So this one is me and a friend of mine. And then let me think. I don't think that. No, this one is a self-portrait. I was like, okay. It's called The Image Bearer. So this one is really biblically inspired. So it's based on the armor of God. So I tried to incorporate like the breastplate of righteousness, the sword, like all this stuff, and everything in here has some biblical representation. So like this is like the river that like Moses floated down in that story, and then like the gates of heaven here, and it's kind of like my world opening up to like represent God through me. But this was a very like, I thought a lot about this piece. This was the first piece I ever like thought that deeply about the storytelling in it. So very exciting, and I hope to create more like this, but I just haven't. Yeah, so that's a self-portrait, and then I don't think there's any more self-portraits. Oh yeah, this one technically is me. I played that character in Anastasia. Her name's Countess Lily. I had like a big song in that musical. It was really fun. I was the comedic relief. So, and this piece, the official Broadway account actually ended up reposting it on their Instagram account. So that was really awesome. I like tagged them. They're like, "Oh, can we repost this?" I was like, "Yeah." So yeah, that's the other one. And then yeah, I don't really draw myself a ton. I didn't start drawing myself a ton until like this year. Just because like my sisters draw themselves all the time, and it's like, well, they look like narcissists. I'm just kidding. But I think it's also the idealization of other people. Sometimes in your head, you don't think of yourself as like, I think as a young adult, I didn't value myself as much as I did. Like looking at these characters, I was like, wow, they're so amazing. I wish I could be like that. But now I'm starting to be more like, I'm a superhero in my own way, and I like drawing myself because I'm cool. So, yeah.
Any other questions? That's good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Is your sister doing an art tours, or is she giving that as up and doing something else?
None of them are pursuing it. So her other two sisters, one of them's doing vocal training and getting a degree in vocals, and the other daughter is doing English. So she's writing English and math as a major in college. So yeah, I think that the creative expression is just so part of who we are as people that